The best road for getting somewhere quickly is not necessarily the best road for the people who live beside it. If you are traveling a long distance, you probably want a road that is direct, predictable, and uninterrupted. You don't want to stop every few hundred meters. You don't want vehicles constantly turning across your path. And you probably don't want to share the road with thousands of people making short local trips. But the people who live along that same road want almost the exact opposite. They need to get home. They need to reach businesses. They need to cross the road. They need buses to stop. They need side streets to connect the main road. And businesses need customers to be able to get in and out. So what happens when one road has to do both? How does a road that was built to connect places eventually becomes a place itself? To understand that, it helps to think about two different ways we use roads. The first is as a corridor. A corridor is primarily about movement. It connects one area to another, and its usefulness comes from how efficiently people can travel along it. This is why highways are designed to minimize interruptions. They limit access. They separate opposing traffic. They use interchanges instead of frequent intersections. And they try to keep vehicles moving at relatively consistent speeds. The second kind of road has a very different purpose. It's a street. A street is not only a way to get somewhere else. It's also how you reach the things that are already there. A house, a shop, a restaurant, a school, a bus stop, a side street. All of these destinations depending on being accessible from the road. And that creates an interesting trade-off. The more accessible a road becomes, the more things have to happen on it. Vehicles have to turn, people have to cross, traffic has to enter, traffic has to leave, and eventually, the road that was supposed to move traffic efficiently has to start making room for the life happening around it. And this transformation does not necessarily happen all at once. A road does not suddenly become a main street because someone changes its name. It can happen gradually. People settle along the road. Businesses open beside it. Side roads connect to it. And eventually, more and more trips begin taking places locally. A driver might enter the road with no intention of traveling very far. They might simply be going to the supermarket, or visiting a restaurant, or heading home. A bus might be carrying people to a nearby neighborhood rather than to a distant town. A delivery vehicle might stop at business along the way. None of these trips are unusual, but they all have something in common. They need a road to do more than simply moving forward. They need to access something along the road. And that's when a simple transportation corridor starts becoming something more complicated. But making a road more useful to the people around it comes with a cost. Every new connection gives people more ways to use the road. A driveway lets someone get home. A business entrance lets a customer pull in. A side street connects another part of the community. A bus stop lets people get on and off. And each of these things make the road more accessible. But they also create more opportunities for traffic to interact. A vehicle has to slow down to turn. Another vehicle has to wait to enter. A pedestrian may need to cross. A bus may need to stop. And suddenly, the same road that was designed to keep traffic moving has to accommodate all these other movements. This is the fundamental trade-off. A road becomes more useful to a community by giving people more access to it. But the more access it provides, the harder it becomes to keep traffic moving without interruption. And there's no simple way around it. If you remove the connections, the road becomes more efficient for through traffic, but less useful to the people who live there. If you add more connections, the community becomes easier to reach, but traffic has more reasons to slow down. A main street has to find a balance between the two. And the problem becomes even more complicated because all of these movements are sharing the same physical space. Through traffic wants to go straight. Local traffic may need to turn. People may need to cross. Vehicles may need to enter or leave the road. And none of these movements is inherently more important than the others. They simply have different destinations. The challenge is making sure they don't all interfere with each other at the same time. This is why roads in developed areas often need more than just lanes. They need ways to organize movement. Turning lanes can give vehicles a place to wait. Crosswalks can give pedestrians their own opportunity to cross. And traffic signals can decide which movements get to happen first. In other words, the road does not necessarily become wider as it becomes more important to the community. Instead, the way people use the existing space becomes more carefully controlled. Traffic signals are one way of managing that conflict. They don't create more space. They don't make the intersection disappear. They simply give different movements their own turn. When one direction has the green light, the other directions wait. Then they switch. For a driver who wants to keep moving, that waiting can feel like an inconvenience. But from the perspective of the entire road, it's a way of allowing different movements to share the same space. And we're about to see a simple example of that. At around this spot, the light ahead turns red, so we stop. For almost half a minute, there is nothing physically blocking our path. The road is simply giving someone else their turn. And that small delay tells us something important. This road is no longer concerned only with moving traffic from one place to another. It also has to serve the people and destinations around it. And as we continue, that second road is about to become much more obvious. The interesting thing about this process is that there is no single moment when a road officially becomes a main street. there is no sign that says you are now entering the main street. Instead, the change happens one connection at a time. Another side road joins, another destination appears, another group of people start using the road for a different reason, and with every new connection, the road becomes a little more useful to the community around it. But it also becomes a little less isolated from everything happening around it. That's an important distinction. A road can be busy without being a main street. A highway can carry thousands of vehicles without serving the places immediately beside it. What makes a main street different is not simply the amount of traffic. It's the relationship between the road and everything around it. A main street is deeply connected to the surrounding area. People do not just travel along it. They enter it, they leave it, they cross it, they turn onto other roads, they stop along the way. And the road has to accommodate all those movements while still carrying traffic through the area. That means the road itself starts becoming part of the local transportation network. Instead of being one continuous path, it becomes a series of connections. One road leads to another. A side street leads to the main road. A business connects directly to the traffic passing by. And eventually, the road becomes important not just because it takes you somewhere, but because of everything you can reach from it. That's a subtle change, but it has a major consequence. The more destinations a road connects, the more reasons there are for vehicles to slow down, turn, or stop. And the more local traffic joins the road, the more difficult it becomes to treat everyone on it as if they are making the same journey. Some people may be traveling straight there. Others might only be going for a few hundred meters. Some are heading home. Others are heading to work. Some are looking for a business. And some are simply trying to get from one side of town to the other. They are all using the same road, but they're using it for completely different reasons. And that is when the road's real challenge begins. How do you keep all these different trips moving when they are no longer moving toward the same goal? Because the farther we continue, the more this road has to answer that question. And that is where the difference between a road and a main street becomes even more important. Because when all of these trips share the same road, they don't just have different destinations, they can also interfere with one another. A driver traveling straight may have to slow down because someone is turning. A vehicle trying to enter the road may have to wait for through traffic. A bus stopping for passengers can temporarily occupy part of the road. And a pedestrian crossing can require vehicles to stop completely. None of these movements is unusual. The problem is that they are all happening on the same piece of infrastructure, and the road has only so much capacity to handle them at the same time. This is why adding more traffic does not always mean simply adding more vehicles. Sometimes what matters more is what those vehicles are trying to do. 10 vehicles traveling straight through an intersection may be relatively easy to accommodate. But if some are turning, some are entering, Some are leaving and others are stopping. The same 10 vehicles can create a much more complicated situation. The road has not become physically narrower. There may not even be more vehicles than before, but there are more interactions. And every interaction creates another opportunity for one movement to affect another. This is one of the reasons why a road can function perfectly well when traffic is light, and suddenly feel very different once the community around it becomes more active. The challenge is not simply moving more vehicles. It is coordinating more kinds of movement within the same limited space. And as we continue into the town, we're about to see what happens when those competing movements start becoming difficult to separate. And this is where the problem becomes more than just an inconvenience. When traffic is light, all of these different movements can coexist without causing much trouble. A car can turn, another car can slow down, a vehicle can enter from a side road, a bus can stop, and everyone can continue on their way. But as more vehicles arrive, the margin for those interactions gets smaller. A vehicle turning across traffic has to wait for the gap. That vehicle makes another vehicle slow down. The vehicle behind it has to slow down too. And suddenly, a movement that only took a few seconds has affected vehicles that were not involved in it at all. This is how a road can start losing its ability to move traffic efficiently. Not because every vehicle is moving slowly, but because every movement is affecting the movement around it. And once that starts happening repeatedly, the delays can begin to build on one another. A small slowdown creates another slowdown, that creates another, and eventually, vehicles that were nowhere near the original interaction can find themselves waiting too. This is one of the strange things about traffic. The road does not necessarily need an accident, a blocked lane, or some obvious obstruction to become congested. Sometimes there are simply too many movements competing for the same space. And a main street is particularly vulnerable to this, because the very things that make it useful to the community are also the things that create more opportunities for vehicles to interact. Businesses bring customers, side streets bring local traffic, interactions connect different parts of town, buses bring passengers, and all of those activities fit into the same road. At some point, the road reaches a limit, not necessarily a limit in the number of vehicles that can physically fit on it, but a limit in how many interactions can happen before those interactions start interfering with one another. And once that happens, the character of the road changes again. It is no longer simply a road that happens to pass through a community. It has become one of the places where that community's traffic comes together. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. The road is still carrying traffic through town, but now the local activity around it is affecting how quickly the traffic can move. And this is why the transformation of the road does not end when it becomes a main street. Once a road becomes important to a community, it usually becomes important to the roads around it too. Side streets connect to it, other roads cross it, local traffic feeds in onto it, and traffic leaving that community use it to reach somewhere else. The main street becomes a kind of spine for the surrounding road network, and that creates another interesting effect. The road may have started as a connection between two distant places, but now it is also connecting many smaller places along the way. A trip that begins on a tiny local street can eventually reach this road. A trip that starts here can continue onto another major route. And a driver passing through a town may never realize how many local journeys are being connected around them. From the driver's perspective, it can still look like one continuous road. But functionally, it is doing much more than that. It is carrying through traffic, it is distributing local traffic, and it is connecting different parts of the surrounding community. The road has become important not because it is particularly large, but because so many other movements depend on it. And that brings us back to the question we started with. Why does a road become a main street? Not because the road itself suddenly changes. It happens because the world around that road changes. People settle here, businesses open, other roads connect, more destinations appear, and gradually more and more kinds of trips begin depending on the same piece of infrastructure. The road becomes more useful, but also more complicated, more accessible, but more interrupted, more important to the community, but potentially less efficient for people simply trying to pass through. And there is no perfect solution, because making the road better for one kind of trip can make it worse for another. A main street is essentially the result of all those competing needs being brought together in one place. It is a road, but it's also a connection to everything around it. And once enough people depend on those connections, the road stops being just a road between places. It becomes part of the place itself. And that's perhaps the most interesting things about roads. They don't just connect communities. Sometimes they become part of what makes a community a community. So the next time you drive to a small town and you find yourself on its busiest street, look beyond the traffic. That road may have started as a way to get from one place to another. But over time, everything around it can turn it into something much more. A route, a connection, a destination, and eventually a main street. Until next time, drive safe, and I'll see you on the road.